You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
First folks that we got on the line are coming straight from the Teamsters International Convention. We've got Ryan Haney. He is a rank-and-file Teamster. We've got John Palmer, the Southern International Vice President for the Teamsters and a member of the Teamsters Reform Caucus, the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Ryan, John, brothers, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's good to be here.
Great. So, Ryan, you had some context for the Teamsters that you wanted to that you wanted to give before we jumped into the conversation about the convention. So,
Sure.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, first, just to introduce myself, I mean, my name is Ryan. I'm a truck driver out in Dallas, Texas. I'm a member of Local 745. But I wanted to, it's so cool that this convention is getting broader notice. I even saw something on NPR was covering it. But I wanted to zoom out a bit and talk about kind of what are the deeper goals? Why is this important? And I believe this is really bigger than the Teamsters. And that's why I think you wanted us to come on this radio show and talk about it. But, our goal, like your goal, is fundamentally to rebuild the power of the working class. That means real wages. That means fully paid health care. That means pensions and retirement. That means forcing political parties to prioritize labor over capital instead of, how it's done now, which is, backwards. Historically, what's worked is having large, strong, militant unions that represent workers in essential sectors of the economy. Unions where if workers decide to strike to withhold their labor, everyone has to take notice. The Teamsters Union used to be a union like this, or at least with the potential to be like this. Millions of workers organized in trucking, parcel, warehousing, logistics. But one thing that hampered us, or at least left our union unprepared to deal with this generalized attack on the working class that began with Reagan. What hampered us was having a union leadership that ran things from the top down, one that had become notoriously tied to the mob. One where members who stood up against were blackballed, they were driven out of the union. Some were even, beaten up and killed for standing up to this corruption. Teamsters for a Democratic Union, a caucus that I belong to as well, was born out of these conditions in 1976, I believe, and has been advocating for member democracy, insisting that more democracy and more member-led unionism will translate into more powerful unionism, will translate into working class power generally. So out of that movement, some important gains were won, like really incredible stuff, like giving every rank and file member the right to vote on top leadership of the union. The mob was driven out completely. There is still corruption, like in any large organization. You're going to find corruption. You're going to find people who take advantage, but it's of a much less dramatic nature. And we have independent monitoring boards that were demanded by the rank and file and set up. And I'd say the Teamsters are now one of the most democratic unions because of this 40-year rank and file movement. And with the recent, with the achievements in our more recent convention that I'm going to let John give out the details about that, I think we're even better poised to go big on member-led organizing, having member votes on contracts that count 100% of the time, actually organizing member-led contract campaigns with some really big employers instead of these backroom deals. And it's this context that will allow us to rebuild our union and empower workers in large employers like Amazon, the logistics industry more broadly.
That's exactly right. And, you mentioned something there that was the broader conversation about the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, the fact that the Teamsters was, it was involved with the mob and things, but the members did not give up on their union in the same way that, and there are a lot of people that will say that unions are corrupt as a way to attack joining unions. That's something that bosses will say during campaigns and it's true to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the union and depending on what region you're in and things like that. But that's always one of the things that they say when you've got a union in your workplace. Oh, you shouldn't join it because it's corrupt, or your dues money is going to go to this or that or the other thing. And what the Teamsters for a Democratic Union have done, which is the same thing as people who are committed to a cause and to principles have always done is they did not give up on their union, which was taken over by malevolent forces, because they recognized that even while it was taken over by malevolent forces, it was ultimately a force for good in a lot of people's lives, and it could be turned into a force for good in a greater way and for even more people's lives. When you have an institution like the Teamsters, like any union, the answer is not to give up on it. The answer is, if it's ultimately it can be turned into a vehicle for the working class, for the emancipation, the liberation of working people, you can't give up on it. And this is an argument. We're on a conservative radio station. This is an argument that our listeners, that many of them that are on the radio, would take to heart as it relates to the United States of America. They think, that there are a lot of people that think at the upper echelons of our government there's the deep state and there's a lot of corruption, and that's certainly true, just like it was with the Teamsters to a greater or lesser extent. But nobody in the audience, by and large, is going to say, I'm going to give up on America. I'm going to give up on America. And just like y'all are not giving up on the project of the United States, you're also not giving up on the Teamsters. And I think that's really important.
Right. You nailed it.
So, Palmer, can you tell us about this convention? Ryan mentioned that, this has, and I mentioned that this convention, this Teamsters convention, has really penetrated the mainstream consciousness in the United States that international union conventions don't often do anymore. Now, of course, this happened all the time. Previously, there was all sorts of reporting on contract negotiations, on international conventions, because the labor movement was a center of power in the United States in the mid-20th century in a way that it's not really anymore. But this convention has really, there are people that aren't even super politically savvy that I've heard saying, "Oh, the Teamsters are doing something. What's up with that, Jake?" And that makes me really excited. I'm like, like normies talking to me about unions. I love it. So, what the hell's going on at the Teamsters convention?
Well, quickly, a little bit about myself. I started driving a truck right out of the military in 1980, became a union member in 80, became a Teamster in 87, went out, immediately changed my life. First generation Teamster, lived in a town of low wages, San Antonio, Texas, transformed my life, let me raise 2 kids and a mother that stayed at home to take care of our children. We lived a solid middle class life, owned all the things that people want to own: homes, cars, boats, all the toys that we strive to have in this capitalistic society. Just was totally sold out. How it changed my life from not being able to run the air conditioner when I first went to work out of high school to being able to live a nice, solid middle class life. So it was aside from my family, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I went on to work as an organizer for Ron Carey, who, we had a similar movement in the 90s. It was the 97 strike and a reform movement we had at the convention in the 90s. We had a 3-way race, and Ron Carey won with a little over 30% of the delegates, and then won a fairly large victory, considering there were more than one group on the ballot. And then we were on the road to reform, and later we slid back into the same sort of bureaucratic top-down movement that we had always been. I know Mr. Hoff is retiring. I won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but I think the members were suckered into thinking the Hoff name really had power. I don't believe that to be the case. The power in labor is always the membership, not some crony sitting at the top of the organization. So this convention was interesting because the members 5 years ago had finally been fed up with what they'd seen, the lack of representation, they're not being heard, right? I'm an organizer, so I spent most of my career as an organizer, some of it as a business agent. They're not being heard. They are simply being fed a corporate line, and the dues need to come into the coffers at the international level, and the contracts are being negotiated in a manner that befitted the employers, and basically kept UPS in particular would throw money at the members, and we would lose language. We would subdivide our membership. So with the TDU movement, which has been around for a long time, we really began to engage people. I think the international and the leadership had done a really good job of attacking TDU and sort of staining it, tarring and feathering it, so that it was really, really hard to fight this fight. But as you say, no one gave up, and we got to this the last convention. I'll give you a really good example. The threshold to get on the ballot as a candidate set by the federal government when they didn't trustee, but the consent decree sort of governed the rules of our conventions and elections, was 5%. As Southern Region Vice President, I needed 8 delegates to get on the ballot. I got 9. There was a lot of ha about that, laughing. We're wasting our money on election, but the members spoke after that, and we won in the South with a 57% margin. So clearly the disconnect's obvious. This time, the disconnect is still there, make no mistake, but the momentum we built through grassroots organizing really, really brought us to a place to where we, this time I think I got, 45% of the delegates, which was the lowest vote count, but I'm still a TDU guy, so I'm not Captain Popularity. But that's not reflective of the membership.
Right.
The membership's yet to vote. We expect to get out and engage the membership and listen to the membership. And we expect to make a big difference. As for the issues, a couple of years ago, the UPS members had a contract shoved down their throat. Many of our members describe it in a much different manner than having it shoved down their throat.
Yeah.
And it felt FM radio.
It felt that way.
So we'll leave it to their
Exactly
imaginations.
what-
Yeah.
Okay, I know we're on public radio, so it felt that way to many people. Our members were enraged. We've organized around that. We wanted to there were several issues. There was they call it a brownout because UPS is brown, but a blackout of information in those negotiations. The members didn't know what was going on. One of the things that we wanted to address was that we want rank and file members in every negotiations. No matter how skilled you are as a negotiator, you don't understand what it's like to walk the shop floor every day. That was a must. So we wanted to abolish the 2/3 rule, which means, I'll try to make it as simple as I can. The International was able to impose contracts if less than 50% of the membership voted. In this case, I think it was close to 50. I think it was in the 48, 49 percentile that rejected the contract. And in the past, in supplements, the International went on, respected that vote, and went back to the table. This time, they stuck it down the members' throat, and the members were really, really angry. They created 2-tier systems, second-class citizens. That's a problem throughout the labor movement. We cannot be doing that to our brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
So all of these things came to a head, and there were a couple other issues we would have liked to see that we lost on. One of them is that to hold the general secretary's position, you would absolutely have to have spent 24 months working as a rank and file Teamster. We felt like that was important. We had an attorney running our union for the last 23 years. That speaks for itself how it played out. So that amendment failed. We wanted to uphold the 5% rule, which is critical to keeping democracy. That one failed, but the overwhelming issues of the 2/3 rule, having rank and file members on the negotiating committee, even the detractors had to own this and pass it. And the gentleman I'm running with, Sean O'Brien, and the remainder of the slate is a coalition of folks that are not all TDU. We knew that we had to pull together a coalition in order to make this happen. Sean O'Brien's very, very progressive. And he won the majority of the delegates, which is a big, long journey in 5 years. So that's sort of the overview of what's happening here. It really is a a rebirth of democracy. If it had been for the government, honestly, the democratic values we have now wouldn't be there. And I'll reinforce that with one more thing, and I'll shut up for a minute, is that TDU was instrumental in engaging with their attorneys, the federal government, and forcing us to get these democratic elements placed in our Constitution. So, it's really critical. The labor movement, it's not like Brian said in the beginning, it's really, really critical that unions become membership driven and militant. Let's be honest. Right. Corporate America gives two about us. They really don't care. And we have to, we have to take a hold of this. We're stronger than they are. There's more of us, and it's time for a change in this country.
Right. That's absolutely right. And the importance of, it's not that of course there is an ideological commitment that you have and that I have to democracy and democratic planks in a union's constitution, because we believe that workers are important, and we have this commitment to workers and worker power, but it's also there's a practical there's a practical nature to having these democratic elements and having a union that is member run, and which is that when you have a union that is really truly member run, which all unions are to a greater or lesser extent, there's a certain amount of structure there that is necessarily democratic, but you can have it to a greater or lesser extent, and the more that you have, the less room that people at the top have for corruption, for taking deals with the bosses behind closed doors, like the UAW president did some time ago. If there was more democracy, if there was more transparency in the negotiation process, if bargaining was open, if all members that are in that contract, that are under that contract, could see all of the negotiations, if all of the bargaining committees had more rank and file representation, if everybody leading the union had to be rank and file, because people in the rank and file, they don't want corruption, they don't want their leaders taking handouts from the boss, they don't want they want their unions to be good, effective organizations for themselves and for their communities. And so the more membership control you have over the union, the better it is, and the more effective your union is going to be able to be. I want to remind everybody that we are coming to you commercial free, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO. If you have a question for us, or if you have a bad boss story or anything like that you want to talk to us about after we finish talking to these Teamsters who are live on location at the Teamsters International Convention, you can give us a call. The phone number is 1-866-494-9866. So we're talking about the Teamsters International Convention with the Southern International Vice President, John Palmer, who is a member of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, rank and file Teamster, who's also a member of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which is the Teamsters Reform Caucus, Ryan Haney. The resolution that has really that has really caught everybody's attention, which there's some talk, especially in the labor space, about these other things which I think are really important and really 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 good, is the Amazon resolution. John, can you talk to us about that? What exactly did it say, and what does that mean, like, functionally going forward?
Well, as you know well, resolutions are, we've all probably, if we've been activists, gone to a city council or, a group or, some sort of caucus and suggested that we move a resolution. So resolutions are strong statements that reinforce the goals and direction of an organization. They're not as binding as some other things, legal things that you can do, constitutional changes. But I think the entire labor movement understands the importance of Amazon. And this resolution reaffirms the commitment of the Teamsters, which happen to have just about every segment of the Amazon system as part of their core constituency, right? We're truck drivers, we have rail, we have ports, we have the warehousing, the entire supply chain. I mean, all the way into the landfill. we represent members in every segment of this supply chain. And I think it reaffirms that the Teamsters are committed to it. We see this as an existential threat to the to working men and women. Honestly, it's bigger. Again, labor needs to get out of the labor box as organized labor and become a part of the bigger community of the working class, and that's where we want to head. My personal view, along with many of the folks that are old organizers like myself, is that this, number one, this is Walmart on steroids. This is the whole, if they could, they're going to buy up the world, right? They're going to own everything. So I mean that, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. They are finding ways into all sorts of industries. Mm-hmm. And, competition is beginning to dry up in this country. So it's going to take an effort larger than just the labor movement. It's going to take and labor unions need to get over themselves and learn how to work together and get away from these turf wars and these egos that we have. As a long-term employee of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, I've got to tell you, the biggest, most damaging thing that we have are egos in the labor movement. The people who just can't seem to understand who pays their salaries. Yeah. But back to my earlier point, we're going to have to coalesce around community, environmental, religious, and other labor unions. I always tell people, again, I know I'm on live radio, but Jeff Bezos could crap the amount of money that we could spend in a lifetime as a labor movement, probably in a day, right, and affect our outcome. But he can't change the outcome of a militant uprising of men and women and communities that clearly understand what's going on, and that's our job. And I'll say to this, the failure of labor, large labor in this country, has been that we've taken on a paternal model instead of embracing the organizing model. The representational model should always be the organizing model. If we're going to win a strong contract at UPS, we're going to have to organize our members to fight for a strong contract. If we're going to win a long-term battle against Amazon, we're going to have to organize more than ourselves. We're going to have to organize the whole country to understand what a threat this move is with Amazon.
Right. And that's you mentioned that it's an existential threat. And why is it an existential threat? It's an existential threat because look what they're doing to logistics industries and warehouse industries and all these things. These were good, middle class, single income, support a family jobs. And the Teamsters put out, in Southern California, Amazon drivers are making $16 an hour, where UPS drivers make $38 an hour plus health care and benefits, and I think a pension, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane what Amazon has been able to do, the propaganda that they've been able to put out into the media about, like, oh, look, we've got a $15 an hour minimum wage, and it's like, that was supposed to be a minimum wage for service industry workers. Like, that, this was not supposed to be a median wage for middle-aged people, and that's what Amazon has tried to turn it into. And that is why Amazon is such an existential threat to UPS drivers and to workers everywhere. And that's why this resolution by the Teamsters at the convention to unionize Amazon is so important. And I'm so excited that happened. We're talking right now to John Palmer, the Teamsters International Vice President for the Southern Region, and Ryan Haney, both members of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. We're going to take a break for the news at the top of the hour for just a moment, and then we will be right back with them to wrap it up. We are coming to you commercial-free, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO, and we'll be right back.
Put it there, boy, and we'll show these fascists what a couple of hillbillies can do.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. We've got a surprise guest today. David Story's joining us. He's going to chat with us, and we're going to take some calls after we finish talking to the Teamsters. And so, John and Ryan, David reminded me that Brian, what's his last name? Sean O'Brien. Sean O'Brien, he's a member of TDU, and he actually, he was the Teamster, I didn't realize who it was, that brought down a truck for an RWDSU rally during the Amazon campaign. And he's running for, what is it, president? Or I don't know exactly what he's running. Do y'all know what Sean O'Brien's running for?
General President.
Just to clarify first, Sean O'Brien, he's not a member of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, but he is a member of this broader coalition that we've built, which, I think is important to note that, it's not just all about this scrappy rank and file caucus going up against the entire establishment or whatever. It's really been coalition building with people who, it's like we may not agree with on 100% of things, but we find that we agree on 80% of things. Right. And we run with that, and that's how we build power.
Right. Okay, that's great. Well,
so it's so great that he extended that support. You said was it to the Bessemer Amazon campaign?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, so what happened is there was a disgruntled former Teamster who was handing out anti-union propaganda at the gates by the RWDSU organizers, and O'Brien apparently heard about it, and he was like, we're not having the Teamsters name sullied as anti-union nonsense, so we're going to come down and we're going to come to a rally and we're going to, have our big Teamsters truck here, and so that's the kind of stuff that I do hope a more militant, a more worker driven Teamsters and other unions can do across the country is lend our support to other organizing campaigns in whatever way we can to show that solidarity and things like that. Do y'all have any at all preliminary polling? Like, do you have any idea how the election is going to go after the convention is over?
I think it's safe to say that we will win a majority of the rank and file vote in the fall, because we're going to be out there at the gates. We're going to be informing the members. We have a grassroots movement that's going to get it done.
That's really exciting. So what are? Oh, I'm sorry, Ryan.
No, I agree with that. I think the difference in us and the other guys is that the grass, and to Sean O'Brien's credit, he's embraced the rank and file movement. He understood that for a long time our union had been divided amongst sort of the old guard and reformers, and Sean understood that we couldn't continue to go on like this. This really is a microcosm of what's going on in our country, and he chose not to make this a two-party system but a unified group that could find common fronts like Ryan talked to earlier. And this is the first time in 30 years that we've really had a chance to be heard. We've been on the sidelines. Sean used lots of football analogy. We're in between the chalk lines now.
Right.
We'll be soon.
Right. Well, that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of the election. To wrap up, why don't you tell us what do you think the labor movement and working people at large can expect from a Teamsters union led by this coalition that TDU has pulled together? Ryan, you want to tackle that? Or you want me to take it?
Sure. I mean, I think they can expect a union that's going to go bold. I think they can expect campaigns that are going to be more member-driven, which I think is very important. You mentioned earlier, we got to have these UPS drivers who do have a relatively strong contract talking about the conditions that they have through a union, not just wages, but also due process, protection against arbitrary termination, things like that the vast majority of workers in America currently lack. But I really hope we go hard after Amazon. I actually worked at an Amazon facility in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was the worst job that I've ever had. I can't underline that enough. It was miserable there. No one deserves to be in conditions like that. And I want to, since we're on an Alabama show, I want to extend credit to RWDSU and the worker supporters in Bessemer, even though that didn't go the way we wanted to see it go. I think that lit a fire under everyone else's butt, including the Teamsters. We've had departments looking and researching this Amazon thing for probably a decade, but no real widespread membership buy-in and education until now. So and also I want to say that UPS will be negotiating a new contract in the coming years. UPS is the largest unionized private company in the United States. It's incredibly important that they negotiate a good contract, that they eliminate this awful two-tier system that was imposed by the outgoing administration, and we're going to need a lot of community support around that too.
Yep, that's exactly right. John, anything from you?
I think Ryan is absolutely correct. The challenges are really, really profound. I think we need to unify the labor movement. It is absolutely the two-tier systems have proven. How long have those been going on? 30 years now. That they anger the members. They divide the members.
Right. That's what the boss wants.
We further. Our society suffers from the same causes of creating classes of people and subclasses, and we need to be the motivator, the thing that rises, makes all the boats float, right?
Right. John, Ryan, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is Adam here. I just wanted to thank you guys both for what you're doing in the labor movement and what you're doing inside the Teamsters. And I want to thank you for coming on this show this morning and trying to fill us in on what's been going on in y'all's section of the labor movement. And just a personal shout out to Ryan. Ryan, we had never met until the Strike Fest. And I want the audience to know Ryan drove all the way from Dallas, Texas with an envelope full of cash donations from his Teamster brothers and sisters. So him and his very sweet wife drove all the way to Brookwood, Alabama, so they could donate in person and support the cause in person to our 1,100 coal miners still on strike down at Warrior Met. So that's the kind of activist and dedicated unionist that Ryan is. It's been a pleasure to get to know you that way, and look forward to hearing more about the great work both you guys are doing inside of the Teamsters.
That's exactly right. John, Ryan, thank y'all so much for talking to us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week and get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments and release them throughout the week. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, you can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website where you can buy our fantastic union-made hats and union-made stickers. That is thevalleylaborreport.org. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report.